You know who needs more of a spotlight? A guy who, admittedly, I have been kind of ignoring in terms of making videos about, but whose story, whose progression, and whose potential is so good that, you know, at this point I think he really deserves his own video. And I was initially going to make this about one of the comparisons that we had seen to another prospect, and if you can fill in the blanks, you might be able to do some detective work as to where I'm going with this, but we'll make a video about that comparison some other day. In this video, though, we are going to be comparing Michael Hage to some of the other players that have really established themselves as NHL guys. And in order to do this, we need to go over some of the context and what makes this player such a valuable piece. So, let's talk today about Montreal Canadiens first-round pick Michael Hage. He was taken in the 21st overall spot, and essentially this was the guy that the Habs took with the... I was going to say the Sean Monahan trade pick, but no, that's not technically correct because the Canadiens made a trade on the date of the draft to go up there. But either way, 21st overall, that's the deal. It's a lot more difficult to do these kinds of conversations without Cap Friendly at our disposal. But either way, Michael Hage is a Montreal Canadiens prospect whose story really does get the waterworks going in your eyes. You can see that he's from Mississauga, Ontario, 6'1", 190-pound, 18-year-old center, but his family, his mom, his dad, they are francophones, and they're huge Habs fans. With the unfortunate news about Michael Hage's father, who very tragically passed away a year ago in a swimming pool accident, all the draft programming, the Canadiens videos, and the NHL's YouTube channel, they all had footage of Michael Hage and his family during the draft, and it was so emotional. Such a strong, powerful story there to affect the Montreal Canadiens and this family as a whole. But either way, Hage is now a part of his childhood team, and he may just very well be, at this point, the most underrated Canadiens prospect. Or at least now he may be? I don't know, you can have your debates in the comments section below as to whether or not that trait really is worthwhile here. But honestly, when you think about some of the underrated guys, quote-unquote, the Canadiens have had in their system, Lane Hudson comes to mind, Sean Farrell was a guy a few years ago that was super hot. Then you had some of the other players that really bolstered themselves up in the spotlight. We made videos about Evgeny Volokhin as a goaltender, and there were some other guys sprinkled in there too. But Michael Hage, I think, is more of an underrated pick, not because, oh yeah, he is coming out of nowhere in the second or third or the fourth round and is now amazing. Like, I think this guy might just have some of the best surplus value that a normal 21st overall pick should have. And maybe that's just me as a Canadiens fan hyping up some Canadiens guys because, you know, Habs fans do this all the time. But hear me out in this one. If you go over to Michael Hage's profile, you take a look at the production here. He had 75 points in 54 Chicago Steel games. 33 goals, 42 assists. He was a double point per game guy in the playoffs. And next season, or maybe in 2 seasons, who really knows, he'll find himself over with the Michigan Wolverines in the NCAA. The thing is, Michael Hage was seen by many as one of the more underrated talents in this position of the draft. Some people actually had him a bit higher than where the Canadiens inevitably took him at number 21. Others had him right around that area. Some had him a little bit lower. So the fact that Hage went number 21 isn't really that big of a surprise. But when you try to listen to some of those who are more optimistic on Michael Hage, it becomes a lot more interesting when you think about where his ceiling could really go. The reason for this is because when you talk about what Michael Hage does well, he's sort of like a jack-of-all-trades, two-way capable center. He's got some really good puck handling, his mobility stands out too, and of course, his offensive productivity comes in spades. He had some really good production for a USHL draft-eligible player, and depending on if he's able to carry that over into the NCAA, there could be a very strong pickup here for Michael Hage in the 21st overall spot. And just the numbers and stuff, these are not the only things that back up this idea, because if you head over to the, I think this is the Byron Bader chart, hockeyprospecting.com, yeah, that's what it is. Here is the hockeyprospecting.com Michael Hage report, indicating that in his draft minus 1 year, so 2022-2023, his NHL equivalency score was 18. However, in this most recently completed 23-24 draft eligible season, Michael Hage's NHL equivalency score bounced up to 32. And if you take a look at some of the draft year comparable players that are listed out here for Michael Hage, you have a 31% chance of being a star and 68% chance of being an NHLer, which is already pretty good. I mean, 68% chance, if you do the math over here, it's very likely that Michael Hage becomes an NHL player based off of the draft eligible season that he had, and a 31% chance of becoming a star is also great as well. The draft year comparisons, though, go as follows. Ilya Kovalchuk, who was a superstar, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who in his prime was a fringe star, Kyle Turris, who was an average producer, Ricard Wallin, whom I'm not really too sure who that is, to be honest, and then Adam Masherin. So you do have a very big variety of guys listed as the Michael Hage draft year comparisons. But of course, I mean, you don't want to see this guy become the next Adam Masherin. You want to see him become the next Ilya Kovalchuk. You want him to become what Pierre-Luc Dubois was at his best. And I say at his best because we all kind of recognize the reputation and the talent profile of Pierre-Luc Dubois nowadays, but either way, if the Montreal Canadiens grab themselves an Ilya Kovalchuk comparable player at 21st overall, that's a pretty big get. We know that Kovalchuk was a Hab himself, so there is some good memories that Habs fans have of that player. But might I remind you, Ilya Kovalchuk at one point in his career was a first overall pick in the NHL entry draft. He was a superstar. Pure, undoubted, 90-point caliber superstar. And sure, he was a winger, not a center, so it's a little bit different when you compare it one-to-one with Hage, but there still was a lot of star power and a lot of swagger out of Kovalchuk. He was the guy who schooled Crosby pretty much. He babied Sidney Crosby and goaded him into taking some unreliable penalties and then scored on the power play and pointed at the guy. Yeah, that was a legendary moment, but of course, it takes a certain level of swagger to be able to do that. I don't know if Michael Hage has that kind of attitude in him. But either way, Hage, if everything pans out, honestly, I do see, like, let's say best case scenario, a prime ceiling of 55, 60 points as a top 6 caliber center. Maybe not a guy who's ever good enough to be a number 1 player, but if he is your second line center, that's not the worst choice to have in the world. If he is your third line center, though, then you probably have a really good center core. Let's just say, best case scenario, it's Ivan Demidov at 1, Nick Suzuki at 2, Doc plays the wing, and then Michael Hage is at 3. That is a really strong center core if all of these guys are able to pan out to the best of their talents. If you wanted to move things around, you wanted to have Demidov playing with Suzuki, and you have Doc as the number 2 center, and Hage still as your number 3, maybe have Owen Beck as the number 4, then things get very interesting when you consider how talented that lineup is as well. I don't want to say that Nick Suzuki is like the best number 1 center in the world. Obviously, I'd say he's like maybe around that middle to bottom half tier. Like, I think there probably are 14 NHL centers that could be seen as better than Nick Suzuki, quote unquote. But still, having this kind of a depth at C, if everything works out in this way, is pretty versatile. And if Ivan Demidov, best case scenario, is able to also become a center, then it all of a sudden changes the way this entire dynamic goes down. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Michael Hage. I know we kind of went on a big tangent there, talking about Demidov and Suzuki and everybody else, but either way, this video is about Hage, a guy who at this point in his career, if he becomes the next Ilya Kovalchuk, or even the next Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think the Canadiens are laughing. Kyle Turris was also a comparison here as well, and Kyle Turris was a pretty good player for my money. I mean, those days with Ottawa, some of the other days that he had in different organizations, though, kind of pale in comparison, but he was a very capable top 6 caliber center in his heyday. So if Michael Hage is able to become that or anything more for Montreal, I think everybody should be very happy with those kinds of results. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Michael Hage and his entire profile. I hope you enjoyed this video. And Bye.